I, 28, female, always knew my sister, Chloe, was the favorite. Our mother never made a secret of it. When we were children, Chloe got the bigger slice of cake. In high school, she got the new car while I got the old family sedan. It was just the way things were. I learned to live with it. I built my own life, found a wonderful husband named Mark, and focused on my career. I did not need to be the favorite. I just wanted peace. When our parents passed away last year, I thought maybe things would finally be equal. Their will was simple. Everything was to be split 50-50 between us. As the more organized one, I was named the executor of the estate. I took the job seriously. I wanted to handle everything with care and fairness. The baby shower was supposed to be a happy day. It was the first big family event since the funeral. I wanted it to be perfect for Chloe. She was 7 months pregnant, and all she talked about was her baby boy. I spent a lot of money on her gift. I bought her the top-of-the-line stroller system she had been wanting. It converted into a car seat and a bassinet. It was expensive, but I thought it was a practical gift that would really help her. I wanted to show her that I was happy for her, that I supported her new family. I wrapped it in blue paper with a big white bow and felt a sense of pride. I was doing the right thing. I was being a good sister. The party was at her house. The living room was filled with pastel balloons and smiling relatives. People ate little sandwiches and laughed. I watched Chloe sitting in a big chair, a paper plate of cake balanced on her stomach. She looked happy. She looked like she had everything she ever wanted. A wave of something complicated washed over me. It was not jealousy. It was more like a quiet sadness for the easy relationship we never had. I pushed the feeling down and smiled. Today was about her. When it was time to open presents, she saved mine for last. Everyone gathered around. I felt a little nervous. I hoped she would like it. She tore off the paper, and her eyes widened when she saw the box. Some of our cousins gasped. "Oh, Chloe, that's the one you wanted," someone said. Chloe looked at the box, then she looked straight at me. A strange smile played on her lips. It was not a thank you smile. It was sharp. It was a smile that had an edge to it. Wow, Sarah," she said, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "You can certainly afford the best. Yeah, can't you?" A few people shifted uncomfortably. I felt my own smile tighten. "I wanted to get you something useful," I said quietly. She laughed, a short, sharp sound that was not friendly. "Useful is one word for it. Expensive is another." She ran her hand over her pregnant belly. "Well, I guess it makes sense. I am starting a family. I have real expenses now. I need things like this." Then she looked right at me again, her eyes cold. "I deserve the money." The room went silent. I could feel every eye on me. Her words hung in the air, heavy and ugly. She was not talking about the stroller anymore. She was talking about our parents' inheritance. She was telling everyone in that room that she was more deserving of our shared legacy than I was. My face grew hot with humiliation. All I wanted was to disappear. I saw my husband, Mark, take a step toward me, his expression full of anger on my behalf. I just shook my head slightly, telling him to let it go. Making a scene would only make it worse. I had to hold it together. I had to maintain the peace. That night, I could not sleep. Chloe's words echoed in my head. I deserved the money. The cruelty of it was one thing. The public nature of it was another. She had shamed me in front of our entire family. She had painted me as some kind of selfish person who was hoarding money while she, the expectant mother, was in need. It was a calculated move, and it had worked. I could see the looks of pity some of our relatives gave me. They were taking her side. Mark sat on the edge of the bed. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I will be," I said, though I did not feel it. "It's just Chloe being Chloe." "That was more than that," he said, his voice tight. "She was trying to hurt you, Sarah, in front of everyone." "I know," I whispered. "But what can I do? Fight with a pregnant woman at her own baby shower? I would be the bad guy." He sighed and put his arm around me. "You are not the bad guy. You are the executor. You are in charge of making sure your parents' wishes are followed. And their wish was 50-50. End of story. I leaned against him, trying to find some comfort. It just feels so unfair. I handle all the paperwork. I deal with the lawyers and the banks. I do all the hard work to settle their estate, and all she does is complain that her half is not enough. It is not about need, Mark said firmly. It is about what is right. Your dad and mom wanted you both to have an equal share. She does not get to rewrite their will just because she is having a baby. He was right. I knew he was right. But knowing it and feeling it were two different things. In that moment, all I felt was the deep, familiar sting of being the lesser child, the one who was never quite good enough. I finally fell asleep, long after midnight, but my dreams were filled with the image of Chloe's smug smile and the sound of her cutting words. The next few days were a blur of work and stress. I threw myself into finalizing the estate, hoping the methodical task of sorting through documents would distract me from the emotional turmoil. My parents had kept meticulous records, which was a blessing. Boxes and boxes of files were stacked in my home office. I went through them one by one. Bank statements, tax returns, property deeds. It was a sad process, reducing my parents' lives to a pile of paper. I also had not been feeling well. I was tired all the time, a deep exhaustion that sleep did not seem to fix. I had headaches and a strange ache in my joints. I told myself it was just the stress of everything, the grief, the estate, Chloe's behavior. It was a heavy load to carry. I had gone to my doctor for a routine checkup a few weeks ago, and they had run some blood tests. I had not thought much about it at the time. I was sitting at my desk, surrounded by papers, when I found a folder I had not seen before. It was a simple manila folder, tucked away at the bottom of a box of financial records. On the tab, in my father's neat handwriting, were two words: medical, private. I frowned. That was odd. I opened it. Inside were not medical records. It was a collection of documents related to a loan. My heart started to beat a little faster. There was a loan agreement, drafted but not formally signed by a bank. It was an agreement between my father and Chloe and her husband, Greg. The amount was staggering. It was for a significant portion of the down payment on their house, the very house where the baby shower had been held. The loan was dated 3 years ago. As I read through the papers, a cold feeling spread through my chest. There were no records of any payments ever being made, no interest, no principal. It looked like they had just taken the money and never looked back. Tucked into the back of the folder was a single sheet of notepaper. It was a handwritten note from my father. His writing was a little shaky. I recognized it as being from the last few months of his life. The note was short, but its message was a bombshell. It said, "Chloe promised to pay this back from her share of the estate. This is an advance on her inheritance. She knows this. Make sure it is settled." I read the note again, and again. An advance. She had taken a massive advance on her inheritance years ago and had never said a word. She had sat there at her baby shower, demanding more money, knowing she had already taken a huge sum that she had never repaid. The audacity of it took my breath away. Her performance, her claims of need, her public shaming of me. It was all a lie. It was a carefully constructed act to hide the truth. I felt a surge of anger, so intense it made me dizzy. This was not just about being the favorite child anymore. This was about deceit. This was a calculated, long-term plan to take more than her fair share. She had used our father's kindness, and then planned to erase the debt after he was gone. She was counting on me not finding out. She was counting on me being the dutiful, peacekeeping daughter who would not make waves. My phone rang, startling me. I looked at the caller ID. It was my doctor's office. I almost ignored it, my mind reeling from what I had just discovered. But a small part of me knew I should answer. I took a deep breath and picked up the phone. "Hello? Hi, Sarah. This is Dr. Evans," a calm voice said on the other end. "I am calling about the results from your recent blood work. Do you have a moment to talk?" "Yes, of course," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "We got the full panel back," he began, "and we found a few markers that are a bit concerning. I do not want to alarm you, but they are indicative of an autoimmune condition. We will need to do some more specific tests to confirm the diagnosis, but based on these results, I am fairly certain. I listened in a fog as he explained what the condition was. He used a lot of medical terms I did not understand. He talked about chronic inflammation, joint pain, and fatigue. He talked about lifelong management and specialized medication. The words flowed over me, but only one thought cut through the haze. This was going to be expensive. Very expensive. The kind of expensive that changes your life plans. "Sarah, are you still there?" Dr. Evans asked gently. "Yes," I managed to say. "I am here." "I know this is a lot to take in," he said. "We will schedule you for a follow-up with a specialist. We will create a treatment plan. There are very effective therapies available now. People live full, normal lives with this." We talked for a few more minutes. I wrote down the name of the specialist he was referring me to. I promised to call and make an appointment. When I hung up the phone, I sat in silence for a long time. The folder with my father's note was still open on my desk. Chloe's sneering face flashed in my mind. I deserve the money. Suddenly, everything was crystal clear. This was not just about fairness anymore. It was not about sibling rivalry or past hurts. This was about my future, my health, my ability to afford the care I was going to need for the rest of my life. The money she was trying to take from me was not for luxuries. It was for my well-being. And I realized, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I was not going to let her have it. The peace I had been so desperate to keep was no longer my priority. My survival was. The first thing I needed to do was confirm the loan. The note from my father was powerful, but Chloe could easily claim he was confused, or that she had paid it back in cash. I needed more. I needed something undeniable. I decided to start with her husband, Greg. Greg was weaker than Chloe. He was easily flustered and a terrible liar. He was my best chance at getting a crack in their story. I waited until the next day, giving myself time to calm down and think through my approach. I could not come at him aggressively. I had to be subtle. I called his cell phone in the middle of the workday. I knew he would be at his desk, away from Chloe's influence. "Hello?" he answered, sounding surprised to hear from me. "Hi, Greg, it is Sarah," I said, keeping my voice light and casual. "Sorry to bother you at work, but I have a quick question about the estate." "Oh, sure, what is up?" he said, a note of caution already in his voice. "I am just going through Dad's old financial records to finalize everything," I explained. "It is a bit of a mess, to be honest. I found some notes about a personal loan he made a few years ago, and I am trying to figure out if it is an outstanding asset of the estate. Did he ever lend you guys a significant amount of money? Maybe for the house?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head as he tried to figure out the right thing to say. "A loan?" he finally said, his voice a little too high. "No, I do not think so. Your dad was very generous with us when we bought the house. He gave us a gift to help with the down payment." "A gift," I repeated slowly. "Are you sure? Because he kept some pretty detailed records. This looks more like a formal arrangement. There is a loan agreement and everything." "A gift?" Greg insisted, his voice getting firmer, as if saying it twice would make it true. "Chloe's dad wanted to help us start our family. He was very clear it was a gift. He would never have expected us to pay it back. He was lying. I could hear it in the way he rushed his words, the defensive tone he took. He was sticking to the story he and Chloe had concocted. I knew pushing him further right now would just make him shut down completely. "Okay," I said, letting a hint of confusion into my voice. "That is strange. His notes say something completely different. Well, I will have to look into it more. Thanks for your help, Greg." "No problem," he said quickly, clearly relieved to be getting off the phone. "Talk to you later." He hung up before I could say another word. I stared at my phone. His denial was just as good as a confession. If it had truly been a gift, he would have been confused, not defensive. He would have said something like, "That's weird, he always told us it was a gift." Instead, he had jumped straight to a rehearsed denial. They had a story, and they were sticking to it. Now it was time to talk to Chloe. I knew she would be much more difficult. I waited until that evening to call her. I needed to catch her off guard, just like I had with Greg. She answered the phone with a sigh. "What do you want, Sarah?" There was no pretense of friendliness with her. I decided to be more direct. "Chloe, I am finalizing the estate accounts. I need to ask you about the money Dad gave you for your house." "What about it?" she snapped. "It was a gift." "That is not what his records show," I said calmly. I found a folder with a loan agreement and a handwritten note from him stating that it was an advance on your inheritance. "You are lying," she shot back immediately. "You are just making that up because you are jealous. You cannot stand that I am happy and having a baby, so you are trying to steal my inheritance." Her attack was so swift and vicious it almost knocked me off balance, but I held my ground. "I am not lying, Chloe. I have the documents right here. He was very clear. He expected the money to be repaid to the estate before the final split." "He was old and sick," she yelled into the phone. "He probably did not even know what he was writing. Daddy would never have done that to me. He loved me. You are twisting his words because you are a bitter, selfish person who does not have anything in her life." The cruelty of her words was breathtaking. She was using our father's illness to discredit him. She was using my childless status as a weapon. Every word was designed to hurt, to put me on the defensive. This is what she does, I told myself. She attacks, so you will back down. Do not back down. His mind was perfectly clear when he wrote this note, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. And this was years before he got sick. The loan was 3 years ago. The note was from a few months ago. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was making sure I would find it. "Prove it," she sneered. "You have no proof. Just some fake note you probably wrote yourself. You are just trying to cheat me and my baby out of what is ours. I deserve that money." She hung up on me. The line went dead. I stood there, phone in hand, trembling with a mixture of rage and a strange sense of vindication. Her reaction was so extreme, so over the top. She was terrified. She knew I was on to her, and her final words, the same ones she had used at the baby shower, sealed it for me. This was a battle she had started, and now I was going to finish it. I spent the next 2 days digging. I went to the bank and, as the executor, requested copies of my father's bank statements going back 5 years. It took some time, but they finally provided me with a thick stack of papers. I took them home and spread them out on my dining room table, a cup of coffee by my side. I felt like a detective searching for a clue. I started with the time period right around when Chloe and Greg bought their house. I scanned the pages, line by line, looking for any large withdrawals or transfers. And then I found it. A single line item that made my breath catch in my throat. It was a wire transfer for a very large sum, the exact amount listed in the loan agreement. The recipient was a joint account under the names of Chloe and Greg, and in the memo line, my father had typed 2 simple words: house loan. I leaned back in my chair and let out a long, slow breath. This was it. This was the proof. A direct bank record. She could not claim this was a fake. She could not argue that our father was confused. It was a clear, documented transaction labeled as a loan. It was the piece of evidence that blew their gift story to pieces. But as I sat there, looking at the bank statement, I realized something else. The date of the transfer was just 2 days before they closed on their house. They had been counting on that money. They could not have bought the house without it. My father had come through for them at the last minute. He had trusted them. He had trusted his daughter to do the right thing. And she had betrayed that trust completely. The inconsistencies were piling up. Greg had called it a gift. Chloe had screamed that I was a liar, but the paper trail told a different story. It told a story of a daughter who took advantage of her father's generosity, a daughter who had a secret debt she was desperate to keep hidden. Her aggression towards me made perfect sense now. It was not just about simple greed. It was a defense mechanism. She was trying to bully me into submission before I could uncover the truth. My own health concerns loomed in the back of my mind. I had made an appointment with the specialist, but it was not for another week. The uncertainty was terrifying. The thought of facing a chronic illness was daunting enough. The thought of facing it while also fighting my own sister for the financial resources I would need was exhausting, but it also hardened my resolve. I was not just fighting for a principle, I was fighting for my future. I decided to talk to someone who was not emotionally invested in the situation, someone who could give me an outside perspective. I called my Aunt Carol. She was my father's younger sister, and they had always been very close. She was a no-nonsense woman with a strong sense of right and wrong. I knew I could trust her to be honest with me. We met for coffee at a small cafe downtown. I brought the folder with me, the note, and the bank statement tucked safely inside. I did not show them to her right away. I wanted to talk to her first. "How are you holding up, dear?" she asked, her eyes full of genuine concern. I heard the baby shower was a bit tense. I gave a small wry smile. That is one way to put it. Chloe was in rare form. Aunt Carol sighed and stirred her coffee. "Your sister has always been complicated, especially when it comes to money. Your mother spoiled her terribly, you know. She always made excuses for her, always bailed her out." My ears perked up. "Bailed her out? What do you mean?" "Oh, you did not know," she said, looking surprised. "Your parents were constantly giving her money, credit card debt, car payments she could not make. It was a running theme. Your father worried about it constantly. He felt they were enabling her, but your mother would always say Chloe just needed a little extra help. She would say you were so independent and responsible. You did not need it like Chloe did." A cold knot formed in my stomach. So this was not a one-time thing. It was a pattern. A lifetime of my sister being taught that she could take and take without consequence. While I was praised for not needing anything, my independence, something I'd been proud of, had been used as a justification to give my sister more. "Did Dad ever mention being worried about her finances, specifically with the house?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Aunt Carol thought for a moment. "He did. I remember a conversation we had a few years ago. He was very upset. He said Chloe had come to him in a panic, saying their financing for the house was going to fall through if they did not come up with a bigger down payment immediately. He was torn. He did not want to see her lose the house, but he was worried about giving her such a large amount of money. He said he was going to make it a formal loan, so she would finally have to learn some responsibility." "And did he ever say if she paid it back?" I pressed. She shook her head sadly. "No. In fact, the last time I talked to him about it, just before he passed, he sounded very disappointed. He said he had tried to bring it up with Chloe, and she had gotten hysterical, accused him of not loving her, of trying to take away her home. She told him to just take it out of her inheritance when the time came. He was heartbroken. He said it felt like she was just waiting for him to be gone." The words hit me like a physical blow. My father had known. He had known she had no intention of paying him back. He had lived his last few months knowing his daughter had treated his love and generosity as a bank account to be settled after his death. The note he left me was not just a piece of financial accounting. It was a plea for me to see the truth and to make things right. I finally opened the folder and showed Aunt Carol the note and the bank statement. She read them carefully, her expression growing grim. "I knew it," she said softly, tracing the memo line on the statement with her finger. "He trusted you to handle this, Sarah. He knew you would be the one to do the right thing." "She is denying it," I told her. "She and Greg both claim it was a gift. She is telling everyone I am a jealous liar who is trying to steal from her baby." Aunt Carol's eyes flashed with anger. "That girl has no shame. She is trying to manipulate the whole family, just like she manipulated your parents. Do not let her get away with it. Your father deserves better. And you deserve your fair share." Talking to my aunt solidified my plan. I was no longer just reacting to Chloe's attacks. I was on a mission. I was going to expose the truth, not just for my own sake, but for my father's memory. He had been hurt by her actions, and I was the only one who could set the record straight. The sleepless nights continued, but now they were filled with planning instead of despair. I went over the documents again and again, charting out the timeline of the loan, the broken promises, and the lies. My own health issues felt like a ticking clock in the background, a constant reminder of why this fight was so important. The stress was taking a toll, The aches in my joints were worse. The fatigue was a heavy blanket I could not shake off. I knew I had to resolve this, not just for my financial future, but for my physical and emotional health. The constant conflict was poison. I decided I needed one more piece of evidence, something that came directly from Chloe herself, something that would make it impossible for her to deny her intentions. I started searching through the old family computer, the one our dad had used for years. It was a long shot, but I hoped he might have saved something. An email, a message, anything. I spent hours sifting through old files and archived emails. Most of it was junk mail and correspondence with friends. I was starting to lose hope when I found a folder labeled Family Matters. I clicked on it. Inside were several subfolders, one for me and one for Chloe. My heart pounded. I opened Chloe's folder. It was filled with emails going back years, conversations they had had about all sorts of things. I started reading through the ones dated around the time of the house purchase, and then I found it, an email chain that made me gasp. It was from Chloe to our father, sent the day after he had transferred her the money. The subject line was, "Thank you, Daddy." The email started with a gushing display of gratitude. "Daddy, thank you, thank you, thank you. You saved us. We can finally close on the house tomorrow. I am so excited. This is all thanks to you." My father had replied simply, "You are welcome, sweetheart. Just remember our agreement. This is a loan, and I expect you to be responsible with it." And then came the final email, the one from Chloe that sealed her fate. She wrote, "Do not worry, Daddy. I completely understand that it is a loan and an advance on my inheritance. It is the only fair way to do it. I will make sure it is all settled properly from my half when the time comes. I will never let this become a burden on Sarah. It is our private arrangement. She will never have to worry about it. I promise." I printed out the entire email chain. The paper felt heavy in my hands. This was the smoking gun. This was irrefutable proof. In her own words, that she knew it was a loan, that she acknowledged it was an advance on her inheritance, and that she had actively planned to keep it a secret from me. Her promise to never let this become a burden on Sarah was the most cynical lie of all. She had done the exact opposite. She had made it my burden, my fight, my stress. The full picture was now horrifyingly clear. Her tantrum at the baby shower was not a spontaneous outburst of greed. It was a calculated, preemptive strike. She was laying the groundwork for this exact moment. She wanted to paint me as the villain, the greedy, childless sister, so that if I ever discovered the loan, no one in the family would believe me. They would see me as the aggressor and her as the poor, pregnant victim. She had been playing a long game, and she had underestimated me completely. I finally felt a sense of power. I was not the victim in this story anymore. I had the truth on my side, and I had the evidence to back it up. I was not going to let her control the narrative any longer. I decided that this could not be resolved in a private phone call or a tense family dinner. That would just give her another opportunity to lie and manipulate. This needed to be handled officially, with a neutral third party present. It needed to be undeniable and final. I called the estate lawyer, Mr. Harris, the next morning. "Mr. Harris," I said, my voice firm and clear, "I need to schedule a final meeting to sign off on the distribution of the estate, and I need my sister, Chloe, and her husband, Greg, to be present." "Of course, Sarah," he said. "Is there a problem?" "There is one outstanding financial matter that needs to be resolved before the final disbursements are made," I said carefully. "It is a significant intra-family loan that was made to my sister, which she has not disclosed." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I see," Mr. Harris said, his tone becoming more serious. "Bring all the documentation you have. We will handle it at the meeting. How is next Tuesday at 10 in the morning?" "That is perfect," I said. "Thank you." After I hung up, I sent a brief formal email to Chloe and Greg, informing them of the mandatory meeting at the lawyer's office to finalize the estate. I did not give any details. I simply stated that their presence was required to sign the final papers. I knew the vagueness would make her nervous. Good. Let her worry. Let her wonder what I knew. The week leading up to the meeting was one of the longest of my life. I went to my appointment with the specialist. He confirmed the diagnosis Dr. Evans had suspected. He was kind and reassuring, and he laid out a clear treatment plan for me. The medication was new and expensive, but he said it had a very high success rate. As I left his office with a handful of prescriptions, the financial reality hit me harder than ever. I needed my full inheritance, not for a fancy car or a bigger house. I needed it to stay healthy. I needed it to live. The day of the meeting, I woke up with a strange sense of calm. The anxiety was gone, replaced by a steely resolve. I dressed in a simple, professional outfit. I gathered my folder of evidence, my father's note, the bank statement, and the printed email chain. I placed them neatly in my briefcase. Mark hugged me before I left. "You have got this," he said. "Just stick to the facts. The truth is on your side." "I know," I said, and for the first time I truly believed it. "I am not afraid of her anymore." I arrived at the lawyer's office a few minutes early. Mr. Harris greeted me and led me to the conference room. It was a formal space with a long, polished wood table and leather chairs. I sat down and placed my briefcase on the table in front of me. A few minutes later, Chloe and Greg arrived. Chloe looked annoyed and impatient. Greg just looked nervous. He would not meet my eyes. "Let's get this over with," Chloe said, sitting down heavily in a chair across from me. "I have things to do." Mr. Harris cleared his throat and sat at the head of the table. "Good morning. We are here today to review and sign the final accounting for your parents' estate. I have the documents here." He slid a file toward Chloe. "As you can see, the estate has been valued, all debts have been paid, and the remaining assets are to be divided equally between you, Sarah, and you, Chloe, as per your parents' will." Chloe glanced at the summary page, a smug look on her face. She saw the final number and nodded, satisfied. She was ready to sign. She thought she had won. "Before we sign," I said, my voice cutting through the quiet room, "there is one outstanding item that needs to be addressed." Chloe rolled her eyes. "Oh, here we go. What is it now, Sarah? Did you decide the antique teapot is worth more than we thought?" I ignored her sarcasm. I looked directly at Mr. Harris. There was a substantial personal loan made by my father to Chloe and Greg 3 years ago. It was never repaid. My father's written instructions state that this loan was to be considered an advance on Chloe's inheritance and deducted from her share. Chloe burst out laughing, a loud, fake, theatrical laugh. "This is ridiculous! I knew you would pull something like this. You are making this up." Greg shifted in his chair, looking pale. "Sarah, it was a gift," he mumbled. "Your dad gave it to us." Mr. Harris held up a hand. "Let's remain calm. Sarah, do you have any documentation to support this claim?" "I do," I said. I opened my briefcase and took out the first document, my father's handwritten note. I slid it across the table to the lawyer. He put on his reading glasses and read it carefully. Chloe scoffed. "A random piece of paper? He was sick. He did not know what he was writing. That means nothing," she said dismissively. Mr. Harris looked at her over his glasses. "This note seems quite clear, Chloe." "It is a lie," she insisted, her voice rising. "She is trying to steal from me." I remained calm. "My father was not sick when he made the loan," I said. Then I took out the second document, the bank statement, and passed it to the lawyer. "This is a copy of his bank statement from 3 years ago. It shows a wire transfer for the exact amount to their joint account. The memo line written by our father reads, 'House loan.'" Mr. Harris examined the statement. Greg swallowed hard. I could see a bead of sweat on his forehead. Chloe, however, was not backing down. "So what?" she yelled, slamming her hand on the table. "He called it a loan, in the memo. It was a joke between us. It was a gift. A gift! How many times do I have to say it? You have no proof that we were ever supposed to pay it back." She was cornered, and she was coming out, fighting. She was loud, aggressive, and trying to create chaos to distract from the facts. She was counting on me getting emotional and backing down. But I was not the same person I was at that baby shower. I let the silence hang in the room for a moment after her outburst. I looked at her, my expression unreadable. Then I turned back to Mr. Harris. She is right, I said quietly. A note can be misinterpreted. A bank statement can be explained away. But it is much harder to explain away your own words. I reached into my briefcase and took out the final document, the printed email chain. I slid it across the table. This is an email conversation between Chloe and our father from the day after he transferred them the money. Mr. Harris picked it up. Chloe's face, for the first time, showed a flicker of genuine fear. She knew what those emails said. Mr. Harris began to read aloud, his voice calm and steady. He read Chloe's gushing thank you. He read our father's gentle reminder that it was a loan. And then he read the final, damning email from Chloe. "Do not worry, Daddy," he read. "I completely understand that it is a loan and an advance on my inheritance. It is the only fair way to do it. I will make sure it is all settled properly from my half when the time comes. I will never let this become a burden on Sarah." He finished reading and placed the paper down on the table. The silence in the room was absolute. Chloe's face had gone from red with anger to a pasty white. She stared at the paper as if it were a snake. Greg looked like he was going to be sick. Mr. Harris looked at Chloe, his expression stern. "This is quite clear, Chloe. You acknowledged the loan in writing. You acknowledged it was an advance on your inheritance. The estate is legally obligated to follow these instructions. The full amount of the loan, plus a reasonable amount of interest for the past 3 years, will be deducted from your portion of the inheritance." He pushed a new summary page across the table. It showed the revised numbers. Chloe's share was now significantly smaller. It was a devastating financial blow. For a moment, she just sat there, speechless. The fight had gone out of her. The lies had crumbled. There was nothing left but the ugly truth. Then the shock wore off and was replaced by pure rage. Her face twisted into a mask of fury. "You!" she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You did this! You dug through his things! You invaded his privacy! You are trying to ruin my life!" "No, Chloe," I said, my voice even and strong. "You did this! You took the money! You lied about it! You betrayed Dad's trust! And you tried to humiliate me, to cover it up. These are the consequences of your own actions." "I hate you!" she screamed, tears of rage streaming down her face. "I hope you are happy. You took money away from my baby." Greg finally stood up and put a hand on her shoulder. Chloe, let's go," he whispered, his face ashen. She shook him off, her eyes still locked on me. "This is not over," she hissed. But it was over. She had no legal standing. She had no ground to fight on. She had been caught in her own web of lies. Greg managed to pull her to her feet and half dragged her out of the conference room, her sobs echoing down the hallway. I sat there, listening to the sound of her retreat. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel happy. I just felt a profound sense of relief. The weight that had been crushing me for months was finally gone. Mr. Harris looked at me with a sympathetic expression. "I'm sorry you had to go through that, Sarah. You did the right thing." I nodded, unable to speak. I signed the revised paperwork, my hand steady. The fight was won. I had protected my father's wishes, and I had secured my own future. As I walked out of the lawyer's office and into the bright sunshine, I took the first deep, clean breath I had taken in a very long time. In the days that followed, the fallout was swift. News travels fast in a family, and the story of what happened in the lawyer's office spread like wildfire. Aunt Carol was the first person I called. I told her everything, from Chloe's theatrical denials to the final damning evidence of the email. "Good for you, Sarah," she said, her voice full of pride. "Your father would be so proud. He raised you to be strong and honest, and you honored him today. You did what he was too heartbroken to do himself." Her words were a balm to my soul. It was the validation I did not even know I needed. It was not just about the money. It was about doing right by my father. "What do you think will happen with Chloe?" I asked. "She will face the music one way or another," Aunt Carol said grimly. "She built her life on a foundation of lies and entitlement. That kind of house cannot stand for long. People will see her for who she is now. Aunt Carol was right. A few of our cousins called me, the same ones who had looked at me with pity at the baby shower. They were apologetic. "We had no idea, Sarah," one of them said. "The way she was talking, we thought, well, we are so sorry. We should have known better." The tide of family opinion had turned completely. Chloe's attempt to paint me as the villain had backfired spectacularly. She had lost her audience. A week after the meeting, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered cautiously. It was Greg. His voice was low and defeated. "Sarah," he started. I wanted to call and apologize for my part in all of this. I knew it was alone. I told Chloe we should just tell you about it from the beginning, but she would not listen. "You lied to me, Greg," I said simply. There was no anger in my voice, just a tired statement of fact. "You sat there and lied to my face." "I know," he said, and he sounded genuinely remorseful. "I am so sorry. I never wanted things to get this ugly. Chloe is just... She gets an idea in her head, and she cannot let it go. She is not taking this well. We might have to sell the house." The news did not bring me any joy. It was just a sad consequence of their poor choices. "That is between you and her, Greg," I said. "I know," he said again. "Is there any way... Can we work something out? A payment plan, maybe? So we do not have to take the full hit from the inheritance all at once?" I thought about it for a moment. The old me, the peacekeeper, would have considered it. The old me would have felt guilty and tried to smooth things over. But the old me was gone. "No, Greg," I said firmly. "The time for working something out was before you both lied to me and tried to publicly shame me. The lawyer's decision is final. The deduction has been made. It is over." He was silent for a moment. "Okay," he said softly. "I understand. I just had to ask." We ended the call, and I knew that was the last I would hear from him for a long time. He had chosen his side, and he had to live with the consequences. My new boundaries were clear, and they were not negotiable. My life began to settle into a new normal. The estate was officially closed, and the inheritance was transferred to my account. Seeing that money in my bank account was not a victory dance moment. It was a quiet sigh of relief. It was security. It was the ability to pay for my medication without worrying. It was the freedom to focus on my health without a crushing financial burden. Mark and I started planning for the future, a future that now included managing my chronic illness. We talked about treatment options, lifestyle changes, and how to best support each other. The whole ordeal had brought us closer together. He had been my rock, my unwavering supporter, and I loved him more than ever for it. Every now and then, I would get a small piece of news about Chloe. I heard through the family grapevine that they had put their house on the market. The reduced inheritance was not enough to cover their mortgage and their lavish lifestyle. She had to give up the big house she had been so proud of. I heard she was not speaking to most of the family, isolating herself in a bubble of bitterness and blame. She had lost her home, her reputation, and the respect of the people who were supposed to be her support system. She had gotten what she wanted, to be the center of attention, but not in the way she had imagined. One evening, about a month after the lawyer meeting, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I did not recognize, but I knew who it was from. It was a single, bitter sentence. "I hope you are happy." I stared at the text. A year ago, those words would have cut me to the core. They would have filled me with guilt and self-doubt, but now they just felt empty, pathetic. I looked up from my phone at Mark, who was sitting across the living room from me, reading a book. He looked up and smiled at me. In that quiet, peaceful moment, I felt a wave of contentment wash over me. I was safe. I was healthy, or at least on the path to managing my health. I was loved. I realized the answer to her question. I was happy. Not because she was miserable, but because I was finally free. I was free from her manipulation, free from the weight of our family history, and free from the need to keep a peace that was only ever on her terms. I deleted the text without replying. I did not owe her an answer. I did not owe her anything. I turned to Mark. I am, I said. He looked confused. You are what? Happy, I said with a smile. I finally learned that my peace is more important than her performance. And in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that I had made the right choice. The fight had been hard, but the peace it had brought me was priceless. Chloe had spent her whole life thinking she deserved more. It turned out so did I. And I had finally fought for it.